to get that delicious beer, but we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to figure out like how I want this to be. Okay, so welcome to our 8th monthly. My name is Michelle Storms. I'm the Deputy Director of the ACLU of Washington, your state affiliate, and I love being here with you guys every month. I love greeting this crowd, and I'm so glad you're here. And I understand that we have some folks who are live streaming in, so hi live stream, everybody wave. I don't think they can't see you, but just wave anyway, they'll know, they'll feel the love. Okay, so as is becoming our custom, of course I need to know if you've been here before. So will you raise your hand if you've come to this before? Yay! And also I'd like to know who's here for the 8th time. Yes! Okay, you're serious. You're hardcore. So welcome back, fabulous people, and welcome all you brand new people. This is such an important event for us because it's an opportunity for us to share with you the important work that's happening in your affiliate and to keep you engaged and to figure out how you can be more engaged. So now, next question. If you are a member, if you have become a member of the ACLU and have that card, you're a card-carrying member whether you carry it or not, please raise your hand. Ow! Yeah, that's fantastic. That feels like more than half the room, so I super appreciate all of you for doing that. And you know, those of you who are members already know you can be a member for as little as $20 a year, which is kind of a steal to keep democracy, right? So listen, we don't just, I mean, obviously the membership dues help us do what we do, but it's more than that, because it's when we go to lawmakers and say, in this country we're 1.7 million members strong, that's a message that's powerful for them to hear. So then I have another question. This is a rhetorical question, so you don't have to answer me. But if for those of you who are not a member, I just want to ask you, why not? And okay, so it's not because I'm trying to be pushy, but because I want you to just kind of ask yourself why not at that super neat rate of $20 a year. Because here's the thing, we're in a situation in our country right now where our president is pretty hell-bent on taking away the rights of a lot of people, of transgender people, of Muslim people, of anybody who immigrated at any time, which is like everybody, and indigenous people as well. Like, that's what we're up against, and you need to be, like, seems to me, on the team that's fighting to keep our Constitution strong and to keep democracy alive. So if it's something that you've been on the fence about, I hope you'll join the crowd. And if you have questions, feel free to direct those to me or to any of the other beautiful staff people here. Staff people wave. They are these people, like they work all day for democracy and they're here with you tonight. So give them a hand. Okay, so here's a quiz question, because I say this every month. Now, nationwide, the ACLU has about how many lawyers? Who has this number in their head? No. So we have about 350 lawyers across the country, which, okay, so that's not bad. Like, we could do better. But what about Jefferson Beauregard Sessions? How many lawyers does he have? Who remembers this number? 11,000. So that's your David and Goliath situation right there. So again, that's why we want to have your membership. We want to be able to say how strong we are and how many people believe in upholding the Constitution. So join us on the phone or at the table. Is there a table? Yeah, there's a table back there, or on your phone at aclu-wa.org/join, and then have a free beer, because that's also what's happening here tonight. Okay. So it has been almost a year since the 2016 election, and some of you know that I started at the ACLU in September of 2016, so just in time for the wild ride to begin. And I don't know about you, but when I kind of look back on that night in November, there's a lot of words that come to mind, like, yeah, like wounded. You know, it was kind of a surreal experience and a mind-boggling experience, and you know, it's still difficult to fully comprehend so much of what happened. And you know, in January, right after the inauguration, it was just about 3 or 4 days after the inauguration that those first executive orders were signed with the very first Muslim travel ban. So we were off to the races immediately. And so all those truths that we're supposed to hold as self-evident, you know, that we're all free and we have these freedoms, that hasn't been true for everybody, or at least it wouldn't be true if this president has his way, which is all the more reason why the ACLU is here to stand up for the Bill of Rights, not just for some of the people of America, but for all people in America. So women, for example, who we think have the same right to insurance coverage that men have, and that is under assault as of about a week ago. Muslims, for example, who we think have the same rights as Christians, Buddhists, pagans, Hindus. Transgender people, for example, who we think have the same right to live free from discrimination and be safe in public spaces and serve their country if they choose. Yes. These are all the people who have come under attack in the past year, and particularly since January. So we have to fight and protect their rights and our rights, all of our rights. So there's 300 plus of you in this room tonight. And I think maybe the president hopes that we will get tired or confused or overwhelmed and stop fighting, go back to sharing cat videos and being in denial. But here we are almost a year after the election, and even though that we have that gut punch experience, right, like we're not tired, we're not confused, we're not overwhelmed, we're still fighting. And when I say we, I do mean we. I mean all of us here. You're here tonight because you care enough to want to be engaged and to be involved. So this is what membership in the ACLU is all about. And so thank you for being here.
Woo! Thank you.
Oh, I want to share something too. So this little blue thing, I don't know if you can see it because it's so small. This is our Bill of Rights in simpler words. It's really great. It really breaks down those freedoms and those promises under the Constitution, which, by the way, we acknowledge that the people who wrote the Constitution were only writing it for a small subset of the population, but those were good ideas, and we want those ideas to apply to everybody, and that's what we're all about. So, these are wonderful little pocket things. They're in a lot of places around here. Please walk away with at least one of these. Take a look at it. You know, the Gold Star Father Khizr Khan, who is so wonderful and brilliant, you know, recommended that our president read the Constitution. This is in simpler words, so I'm just saying it's available. Anyone can read this and understand why this is so important. Okay, so before I go into our speaker tonight, which is going to be a lot of enjoyment for you and a lot of good education, I want to remind you a couple of things. I already mentioned the live stream. And you can access that through the ACLU Facebook page if you want to like text your friends and tell them to watch. So you can share the link and let people know. And you can also post your thoughts and your comments, usual hashtag ACLU flights. And I have to do the thank yous, the obligatory thank yous, because they're worthy of thank you. So Red Hook Brewery, thank you for the delicious beer. KEXP, thank you for being our home for 7 out of 8 flights and nights. KEXP DJ Michelle Myers, we love you so much. I mean, the music is just so great. We really appreciate it. So, last thing, please don't forget to enter the raffle, which is, you know, free, so you should enter. You could get some ACLU, KEXP, and Red Hook Brewery goodies. It won't be beer, so just know that. And we'll draw the winner at the end of the Q&A tonight. Must be present to win. Okay. With that, I'm excited to announce tonight's speaker. So our legal director, Emily Chiang, at the ACLU of Washington. She spoke once before at a Flights and Rights, but at the ACLU, she oversees our litigation department and all of the litigation that is taking place. And she's going to tell you about some really great things. So that is the work to protect civil liberties throughout the state. And so, you know, of course, we ask everybody who speaks for a bio, but she was very humble, and she said, I have worked at a law firm, other nonprofits, and in academia, but I love the ACLU of Washington best of all. That's her bio. So I could embarrass her by listing a lot of her accolades and experiences, but they're So I am, a little bit, because she's done some great stuff. I mean, one of the things she did early in her career was work at ACLU in New York at the Racial Justice Project, and I think that's where she really cut her teeth on ACLU issues and work. She's been a clinical law teacher at a law school in Utah, and then she's also been in private practice. But again, she was the ACLU of Washington best of all, so that's what you should just keep in your mind. So she's outstanding. You're going to enjoy hearing from her. Please join me in welcoming Emily Chiang.
Hello. Oh, Michelle's a little taller than I am. Can folks hear me in the back? Excellent. So the last time I spoke at one of these things was back in March, and I pulled up my notes to kind of remind myself, like, what did I already tell these people? And I remember thinking, like, wow, we were all a little breathless back then, and not so much with excitement, mind you. It was more exhaustion. And I think more than 6 months later, we've hit our stride a little bit, which is nice. I'm not really a runner, but the analogy is working for me, so I'm going to stick with it for a while. Just bear with me. We've been pacing ourselves better, right? We've been drafting off others when we can, especially our amazing allies in town, like the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Legal Voice, CLS, Team Child, NJP. The list goes on and on. We've been better about remembering that really this struggle, this thing that we're in, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And to that end, we've been hydrating, eating lots of carbs. And most importantly, really, for you guys, we've been relying in large part on your positive energy and your kind of cheering us along the way. And that's really made a difference, I think, in my ability and in the ability of our staff to, kind of complete this race, to finish the mission. It really matters to us to know that, like, you guys are basically metaphorically standing by the side of the road throwing cups of water at us, right? Like energy bars. So that's been great. I am here to talk about the year so far because it's been a big one and a lot's been going on, right? Both some positive things and a whole lot of really horrible things. So across the country, the ACLU has taken 103 actions against the Trump administration. Wow. Not bad for 350 lawyers against 11,000. And here in this office, the legal department, which has far fewer than 350 lawyers, and some of them I believe are back there somewhere. Yay, they're waving. Hello, I'm going to wave back at you. So this fabulous team has filed 13 new cases in the last year and 23 amicus briefs. Pretty awesome. And they've done it on a wide range of issues. So that's just not, only Trump-related stuff. Everything from challenging the Muslim ban, which of course is Trump-related, to ensuring that transgender people have equal access to health care, to protecting the rights of homeless people. I mean, we cover the bases because that's our job, frankly. But today I'm going to focus a little bit on what's happening at the U.S. Supreme Court level. This is going to be like the educational component of the evening for you. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of a little scary over there. There are times when it literally keeps me up at night. And frankly, I'm not sure what's more concerning. The fact that we have this court that we do right now, or that this is actually probably the best court we're going to have for possibly generations to come. So I leave you with that thought, drink your beer. Not enough, yeah. Someone here is trying to leverage that into more drink coupons. So luckily for us, we do have a great team litigating in front of the Supreme Court. It's something that the ACLU has long really specialized in a way that really few groups can say that they have. So we have several cases going to the U.S. Supreme Court this year, and each one of them is actually critically important. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus on 3, and I'll also talk about the Muslim ban, because that's sort of at the court and sort of not. So the first one I want to talk to you about is the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. So how many of you here have heard of the Arlene's Flowers litigation? All right, a fair number. So for those of you who haven't, we in the Washington State affiliate brought a case against a flower shop in Eastern Washington that refused to serve our clients, Kurt and Rob, because the wedding that they wanted to have was going to be a gay wedding. And we were like, well, hey, this is America. Like, if you have the money to buy flowers, you should be able to buy flowers, right? Like, it shouldn't matter what kind of wedding you want. So this case that's up before the Supreme Court is very similar to the flower shop case, except here it's not flowers, it's cakes. And behind the cake baker, there are also calligraphers. There are other wedding-oriented people who want to assert a similar right. Basically, they want to say, hey, we should be exempt from the general rule that in this country, if you operate a business, you have to serve everyone who comes in through the door because as Americans, we care only about the color of your money, right? And they're claiming this not as a, they don't say like, well, it's because I'm a bigot, because that, that doesn't really fly. They say is, look, I have a First Amendment right. Like you have your right to go do whatever it is that you do, but I have a First Amendment right because what I do is different from what those other stores and businesses are doing. What I do is art, right? And I have a right to create art in the way that I want to do it. My floral arrangements are an expression of myself. The cakes that I make are not just delicious, they are artistic. And the government can't force me to create my art for just anyone, right? I should be able to pick and choose on the basis of my religious beliefs, basically, who I want to serve. And really what they want to do is to not serve any gay people, and certainly not for their weddings. The problem, of course, is this is a license to discriminate, right? And it's particularly terrifying when you think about the fact that there's really no stopping point. So, flower arrangements, cakes, what about wedding dresses, right? I think some of those are pretty fancy. Maybe you get a glue gun and you're like sequencing things, affixing flowers to the dress in a particular way. Musicians for weddings, right? This would arguably cover them too. It's Seattle. Coffee art. And it's also not clear to me why what they're saying would be limited to gay weddings. All of the cases so far have been, and the woman who operates the flower shop in the Arlene's Flowers case says, well, look, and actually I would be happy to serve the gay couples generally, and I have in the past. It's just really the weddings that I object to. But it's not clear to me why the logic of what they're saying would limit it to weddings, because if you're an artist and you can't be forced to make your art for anyone, you can turn anyone away. It could be, a woman who you think is dressed immodestly, or conversely, a woman who you think is too covered up. And it could be on the basis of really any belief, because, hey, why should the government be able to force you to create any art that you don't want to create, right? And so the real issue is like, look, it's not art, people, it's a business. And this would undermine civil rights law for everyone, not just gay people. And also really, it's so profoundly un-American, right? Like if you have the money, you should be able to buy stuff. Isn't that the whole point of not being a communist country? I keep getting caught up on that. So anyway, we fought the Arlene's Flowers case all the way up to our state Supreme Court, and luckily they got it. The other side has actually petitioned for the U.S. Supreme Court to take review of the case, and we're going to fight that because we think our state Supreme Court got it right, and that law should stand. And meanwhile, our national office is going to fight tooth and nail on the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. So that's the first case. So the second case I want to talk to you about is called U.S. v. Carpenter. How many of you have a cell phone? All right, now leave your hands up for a minute. Seriously, and really, I assume that pretty much everyone has, like, unless you're total Luddite or something. Now, those of you, leave your hands up if you are interested in letting the government have access to that phone whenever it wants to and without telling you. Oh, come on. Well, you have nothing to hide, right? What, are you worried the government's going to find out that you were at the ACLU's Flights and Rights event? Taking selfies, hashtag ACLU flights. So this case, US v. Carpenter, that's what this case is about. The federal government is arguing that it has a right to your cell phone location data without a warrant. Doesn't need to go to any sort of judge, argue that like you've done something totally suspicious and questionable, which presumably wouldn't include attending this meeting, but who knows, maybe, right? Jeff Sessions. And that the reason why it has a right to do this is because, get this, you've already surrendered that information to your cell phone company. Makes sense, right? I mean, you've like waived your right to privacy. If T-Mobile can figure out where you are, why shouldn't Uncle Sam? So this is, of course, an astonishing position for the US government to be taking. And think of everything else you hand over to private companies just because of the way our world operates today, right? I mean, pretty much literally everything we do is online. And no, we're not going back. I mean, you can wrap your cell phone in tinfoil and ditch it. But that's highly unlikely, right? I mean, and I'll say, it took me a long time to get with the smartphone program. I was very resistant, and now I'm like as addicted as everyone else. And sometimes I wish, like, oh, I should have less time on my cell phone. I should be interacting with my kid. And then I go back to my cell phone, right? I mean, it's like, it's what we do. So the technology evolves, and thankfully, so does our Constitution. So here in Washington, how many of you have heard of a device called a Stingray, or a cell site simulator? You guys need to start watching Homeland. And the point is, like, you shouldn't have to watch Homeland to know what our government is capable of, right? But so for those of you who don't watch Homeland, a cell site simulator, which is a Stingray, is like calling it it's like a Xerox machine or Kleenex, right? It's like the company name that's become known for it. It basically tricks your phone into connecting with it instead of with a cell phone tower. So it acts like a cell phone tower, and your phone hooks up with the Stingray, or the cell site simulator. And then the government agents, you know, the men in black, they can figure out where you were. Some models, we think, allow them to figure out what you were doing. They can fish around in your phone, possibly. So interestingly, how many of you knew that the city of Tacoma is the proud owner of one of these devices? Yeah. And it uses it a lot. Like, we're talking 180 times over a 5-year period, and that's just from 2009 to 2014. The other interesting thing is, some of you are like, oh, well, you know, I don't live in Tacoma, I mean, those guys in Seattle, it doesn't matter, right? This isn't gonna affect me. One thing I actually forgot to say about the cell site simulator is it'll sweep up everyone within a certain radius. So those of you who are patting yourselves on the back like, well, I'm not a drug dealer or a terrorist, I don't need to worry about that. The device doesn't care. It doesn't necessarily distinguish between like the target phone and your phone. And the data could live, you know, forever as far as we're concerned, right? We have no idea what they're doing with it. So the other interesting thing to note about the city of Tacoma's use of this device is they have this system where they're like, hey, we're a friendly law enforcement agency. You know, we got this really nifty thing, and we don't want to hog it all to ourselves. So if you ask us nicely, we'll let you use it too. So what this means is, and we had to fight hard for access to these documents, because we said, hey, we think you have one of these. Where are you using it? And they're like, oh, no, we don't need to tell you that. I'm like, actually you do, right? It's that whole democracy thing. Like, you work for us, not the other way around. There's a Public Records Act. So it turns out that they've lent this device freely to all sorts of people, including ICE. Oh, yeah. You need more beer coupons now, right? Pierce County, King County, that's right here in King County, Everett, Grace Harbor, Fife. There's a long list of other people the city of Tacoma has lent this device out to, and no one knows about it. So we'd like to change that starting tonight, actually. Go and tell your friends. And if you live in Tacoma, you might want to start asking some awkward, uncomfortable questions like, hey guys, what's up with this device? And why are you lending it to folks like ICE? So we are fighting hard to hold the city of Tacoma accountable. And it's the same thing as this US v. Carpenter thing, right? Like this false idea that like just because everyone has one of these devices, it means the government should be able to access what's in your device, right? So just as the government can't come into your house and rifle through your stuff without permission, and by the way, we recently got a great ruling from a court of appeals here in Washington that includes homeless people living in their tents. Neither can it get into your phone and muck around in the stuff in there without your permission. Pretty basic stuff, and we're going to keep fighting this because it's important. So the third case I want to talk to you about it's called Husted VAP Randolph. I was going to say, with Tacoma, so much of this is like, it's government accountability, right? It's just basic democratic principles. So the Husted case is interesting because it involves another very basic democratic principle that like, it's so basic, I don't think, well, maybe they teach it in like second grade civics or something. It's that the voters choose their government in a democracy and not the other way around, right? That like, the most essential definition of democracy is that we, the people, decide. We pick who will represent us and who will legislate and govern on our behalf. And it's not that the government gets to pick and choose who the voters are. So this is a case about voter purges. So in Ohio, if you don't vote every year, the government basically says, well, hey, use it or lose it, bub. That's how I imagine they say it. It's gonna purge you from the rolls. And it doesn't matter why. Maybe you were sick. Maybe you were taking care of someone who was sick. Maybe you were out of town. Maybe, weirdly enough, you were like disgusted with the political options. Either way, the government of Ohio says, hey, we should be able to tick through the rolls and get rid of people we don't think should have the privilege of voting anymore. And guess who this disproportionately affects? The 1%? No, right? Poor people, black people, people for whom maybe English isn't the first language, like the usual suspects. So luckily, we don't have this particular problem here in Washington State. I don't know if is there anyone here from Ohio before I slander this? Oh, sorry, man. Well, but you moved. So, there may be other reasons why we're thankful we don't live in Ohio, but this is really one of them. There's also, many of you have probably heard about a partisan gerrymandering case also going up to the Supreme Court. The ACLU, we've submitted an amicus brief in that case. But partisan gerrymandering is another thing that we can be very grateful not to have to worry about here in Washington State because we've done the rational thing, which is to say, hey, how about we have a bipartisan commission? But we do have a bill before the state legislature, which is the Washington Voting Rights Act, that would make it substantially easier to solve a problem that we do have in Washington, which is a lot of cities are stuck with voting districts that are basically totally out of compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And due to a weird quirk of Washington state law, they're not allowed to fix these problems themselves. So part of what the WVRA would do, and it does a lot of great things, it would allow these cities to be able to bring themselves into compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act without, say, us having to sue them, which is what we did in Yakima, and is what we did in Pasco. And then we were like, really? Do we need to just keep doing this? Because it's kind of clear, right? So let's have a legislative solution. And it's borne direct effects, right? In both Yakima and Pasco, as soon as those litigations were resolved, you saw basically Latino candidates filing to run for office and actually getting elected to office because the Latino voters finally were able to have an impact and to have their voices be heard. So the lesson of this work is, look, there's a direct correlation between the fairness of how elections are set up, the systems, the structures, the access that people have, and what government looks like. So we know this, and the government knows this. So don't forget to vote. Do it. All right, last but not least, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Muslim ban. It's like the infamous Muslim ban. They gave us really, as Michelle said, the first real heads up that like this administration was just gonna be nuts. So we are now on ban version 3.0. The first two were technically executive orders. It's like this new lingo that entered American conversation for the first time, right? Like, I don't know that I'd ever heard of an executive order before this guy, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, executive orders. And then the third one, and I think he did this in an attempt to say like, no, it's not 3.0, it's something different. It's a proclamation. And then like in small disclaimer language, they say like, this proclamation has the same effect as the executive order. So the other thing that they did, other than changing the nomenclature, is they've shifted around the countries, right? Like you had 7 countries and the 6 countries, but it's all a shell game, right? Like we all know that the ban is what it is. It still was and always will be a Muslim ban. So like adding a handful of Venezuelan officials and a reference to like all the non-existent North Korean tourists like, desperate to come into the country to like witness freedom. And that doesn't cure what it is, right? It's like that all that other stuff is window dressing. So thankfully, we're not the only ones who cottoned onto this. The latest version of the Muslim ban, and I make a very, I have to say, intentional choice to refer to it not as a travel ban, which some people do, and not that saying that is wrong or anything, but I like to remind people that it's like, this wasn't a travel ban for everyone. It wasn't like we put a general travel ban out. It's like this was a Muslim ban. Let's call it what it is. I can tell you're sucking up for more beer vouchers. So thankfully, the latest version 3.0, was recently enjoined by 2 federal judges, which was great. And although the administration has basically temporarily succeeded in avoiding U.S. Supreme Court review, I think what this indicates is like, look, more or less, we can be thankful that our system of checks and balances is still working, that the rule of law does still matter, that a federal judge can still stop the entire apparatus of the federal government from basically discriminating against a class of people. And that's really important, and it's part of what we're fighting for, right? That like the responsible answer isn't like revolt, although sometimes we kind of want it to be that. We filed litigation, and that litigation has a path. There are procedures to be followed in this, no matter how wacky the administration is. I take great comfort in that. So here in Washington, in this affiliate, we did also file a Muslim ban case. We filed on behalf of people who are here on non-immigrant visas. So it's like students, professors, people who, aren't interested in like having an anchor baby and staying here forever, right? They're here to contribute, to learn, to share their intellectual findings and discoveries with others in the international academic community. We filed on behalf of the Episcopal Diocese of Olympia, which resettles refugees who were going to be affected by the ban. and we filed on behalf of the Council of American Islamic Relations of Washington. And without our plaintiffs, we really couldn't do any of this work, right? So all of the cases that I described, you know, like there was an actual couple turned away by that baker in Colorado. Our clients, Kurt and Rob, were literally turned away because they were gay by a flower shop in the Tri-Cities. The voting case is brought by a guy who showed up to vote one year and, much to his surprise, discovered that he had actually been purged. The cell phone case is brought by a guy who discovered that the government had collected thousands and thousands of pieces of location-related data on him from his cell phone company, unbeknownst to him, right? And so it's important to remember that we bring these cases on behalf of actual people who have suffered actual injuries. That we have people studying at the University of Washington right now who can't go home because they're afraid that they're not going to be let back in, and who haven't seen their families in years, and now know that, you know, for the term of their PhD program or whatever it is, they just might not ever be able to see their family member because that person's not going to be able to get a visa to come in to visit them. So, you know, I want to be sure to leave time for questions. I'm going to leave it at that. This is a very thin slice of the work that we do, and I want to say that we are really lucky and proud to be able to do this work both on our clients' behalf and really on your behalf, the people of Washington. So thank you for that privilege.
So we do have the opportunity to ask some questions, and we have a microphone that Caitlin is over here at this time, and it'd be super great and helpful if you could go there, and if you can't, you can let me know, and we'll work something else out. And so I have a hand up here, and just so you know, the way we are going to do it is we'll gather a few questions up and then answer them in a batch so that we can kind of manage our time a little bit and try to get as many of them in as possible. So I saw your hand, and then you can come to the mic, and we'll just get some questions.
This is terrifying, but coming to a mic, but I'm very concerned about women's right to choose and what's going on with Planned Parenthood. And I'm sure you gave a few samples of things you're working on. You're probably doing something with this too, but I'd love to hear you address that a little bit.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for being here. I was wondering if you have any updates about what's happening around, I think it's DHS starting to collect the online information of immigrants, and you know, obviously, like this includes green card holders and like people who are basically citizens of the U.S. right now. So I don't know if there's maybe in the future a way that people could sue for that. But if you have any updates, that would be great.
Thank you. Yeah, keep coming.
The video that went viral this last weekend about what in Oregon with the ICE agents going into the home without a warrant. Just wondering what your take on that is, and if the ACLU is getting involved, or what information or opinion you can offer on that would be great.
Thank you.
What scares you the most right now?
You talked about the Stingray device and how it's not being treated kind of correctly in this area. Is there a jurisdiction somewhere in America or somewhere else where you think it is a good model for how it should be used, and how that you'd like to see adopted here?
Thank you.
The judiciary has kind of come to the rescue for the American people over the last months, yet the Trump administration has an opportunity to appoint hundreds and hundreds of judges and thousands of prosecutors. What is the ACLU strategy to deal with that kind of an onslaught?
Thank you. Okay. Do you have a question? Okay, no. All right, so we'll, any place you want to start? Women's right to choose? More about what we're doing? Yeah. Sure.
Oh, great. That's great. I was like, oh, I should have brought a pen up here. Luckily, Michelle's written it all down. Okay, so the right to choose, yes. Some of you have probably heard at the national level, a woman we work with a whole lot, Bridget Amiri, has taken the lead on litigation, basically securing the right to abortion and abortion for a 17-year-old undocumented, I'm gonna call her a kid because I think that's really what you are if you're 17. And the federal government actually fought tooth and nail. So recently, I think just today, the Fourth Circuit ruled that, look, you can't obstruct her right to choose. So that's something, at the national level we care very deeply about. Here in Washington, we recently finished up a case securing, so we have a great thing, it's called the Reproductive Privacy Act. And what it basically says is if you're a public hospital district and you provide people with maternity care services, like prenatal care, checkups when you're pregnant, birthing care, you need to provide substantially comparable termination services, which makes a whole lot of sense because you're providing kind of the full spectrum of care to women who come in and seek your help. So what we discovered is, unfortunately, a fair number of counties and public hospital districts were not in compliance. So the first one we sued was Skagit Public Hospital District, and we took them to court and we won. We got a great ruling from a Whatcom judge that said, the fact that you do C-sections, but only if they're medically necessary, doesn't mean you can only perform medically necessary abortions. You have to provide the full spectrum of care, and the care needs to look basically the same from the woman's perspective. It's not okay to have someone come in through your door and be like, oh, well, you need to use that separate entrance, or you have to go to Planned Parenthood down the road if that's the kind of thing that you want, right? We are currently teeing up future litigation on this front. One of the things that particularly concerns us is the extent to which a lot of public health hospital districts have basically entered into agreements with religiously owned and operated hospitals. And those religious affiliations become governed by religious edicts, which affects not just reproductive services, but things like death with dignity, transgender health care, basically access to health care on a range of levels. And we find this deeply troubling and plan, frankly, to sue someone about it. So there's a question about, so this was a huge brouhaha on social media. It was like one of those meta social media things where it's like, oh my gosh, they're collecting our social media information. I'm gonna vent about this on social media and hope that they're not collecting it. So this is kind of a weird thing. The short answer is we're gonna file a Freedom of Information Act request with the federal government. And when I say we, I mean like the ACLU family writ large. A lot of that stuff, if it's going to the national government, usually comes out of our national office, to figure out like what the hell they're actually doing, because it's really unclear. We think that part of the reason why they needed to make this public announcement, and there's like a good news, bad news component to this, so I'm gonna give it to you straight. I guess the good news is we don't think they're actually doing anything all that different. The bad news is they needed to issue this public statement because they'd already been collecting massive amounts of this data, and under the Federal Privacy Act, they're required to disclose that they were doing so. More beer! The kind of weird twist on that is the Federal Privacy Act applies to US citizens, and it's not entirely clear what they're doing with respect to undocumented people, and so that's where the FOIA comes in to figure out what the remainder of that piece is. But yeah, they were already scooping all of this stuff up. It was just a heads up. Oh yeah, so the Oregon ICE agents who entered without a warrant. So I think, knock on something, we've been relatively lucky in Washington State in terms of ICE, and this is not without exceptions. We heard recently, for example, that ICE agents were down at the Vancouver courthouse, which is right across the border from Oregon, asking people for their status, They weren't wearing anything that marked them as an ICE agent, but I mean, obviously, if someone like sidles up to you and says like, "Hey, can I see your papers?" Probably an ICE agent. Like, don't answer. So, kind of how we do the division of labor, just as the national office tends to deal with the national government on, national level things like FOIA requests or, national legislation, the Oregon affiliate will be dealing with the Oregon search. This is obviously something that concerns us tremendously, and we are working to fight. Basically, one of the things we're really concerned about on immigration is state level cooperation or local law enforcement cooperation with ICE agents. It's bad enough that the ICE agents are doing this. We don't have as much control over them as we would like to. I would love to be their boss, but that's not gonna happen. But because we are the people of Washington, we have somewhat more control over things like our local police department and our Washington State Patrol. And so we did file a case recently, for example, against the city of Spokane, where our client was, and you can't make this up, he was driving to church when he got hit by another car. So he's like the totally innocent victim of a traffic accident. The cops come, and the Spokane Police Department, for no reason other than the fact that our clients, and I should say we brought this case with NERP, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, amazing organization. So they, our client's last name was Gomez, and he looked like Gomez, right? And so they were like, hey, I'm not gonna bother running the white driver's immigration, status, but I will run yours. And that's straight up racial profiling, and so we sued. So we are trying to stop this wherever we can. Oh yeah, so what scares me the most is it's actually all those judges. So that's like two questions in one, kind of. It is kind of terrifying. Part of me thinks that I talk to all the people, I talk to people all the time about possible careers in public interest work and people who want to serve their communities and they want to do things like be public defenders, they want to work in impact litigation the way we do, they want to serve immigrants, they want to do community organizing, and I'm increasingly thinking really what I need to be telling them is be a judge. I worry about this. This is definitely something that keeps me up. And the Trump administration's control over the face of the federal judiciary is completely terrifying. It is definitely the thing that scares me the most. So I think part of what we need to do is to remember, okay, this has happened before, right? When I was in law school a long time ago, the Fourth Circuit was a terrifying place to be, and now it's actually a great place to be, right? That things do change. It's not forever, even though I think he's probably going to appoint a bunch of 27-year-olds, but setting that aside. The other thing to remember that gives me solace is here in Washington State, I think we have a special and unique role to play because we have an amazing state Supreme Court and we have a wonderful state constitution. And this doesn't mean that we let the rest of the country go to hell in a handbasket. We just never file in federal court again. Although, it's there's some appeal to that. But, what is it, the Cascadia thing, right? No. But I think one of the best things we can do is to make sure that our state Supreme Court continues to generate the strong civil liberties protective decisions it has been generating, so that when we emerge from this national nightmare, the rest of the country has something to look to. California, cheers. So yeah, that's something. Yeah. And tell Justice Ginsburg to take her vitamins. So the last question is about the use of Stingrays and whether there are any model jurisdictions in the U.S. The short answer is I don't know. One of my, I think, experts in the audience was just shaking her head. Was that a no? Yeah, okay, so she would know. I think part of it is that, this technology, there's a reason why, I watched it on Homeland, right? It was originally developed by the military for the military. And then the nature of this stuff is it's originally kept super tippy top secret, and then it kind of trickles down until you end up like weirdly with the city of Tacoma, like driving around using this thing, right? And so part of the issue is we are still in the first generation of fighting this stuff, where literally the battle is over, like, do you have one? And when are you using it? When are you using it? And like, what does the one that you have do exactly? And the terrifying thing is, like, sometimes we're not even sure that the local cops know what these things do, right? Like, I know technologists, but it seemed to me some of the times, like, they definitely weren't either. And so it's like this information uncovering phase where, and the pushback is always like, oh, no, we can't tell you because the terrorists are watching, right? Like, they'll find out that we have this and they're gonna comport themselves accordingly, right? And it's like, well, look, it'd be one thing if you were using this to, like, actually catch terrorists, but like, you're using it in Fife. Like, it just does not compute, right? And like, and what we suspect is happening is, like, you're using it in low-level drug cases where you just, like, don't want to do the footwork. You're like, well, we have the guy's cell number. Let's find him using this device we have, type it in, and like, so really the first step in our advocacy and litigation is figuring out what the hell is going on and starting to educate local governments that, like, hey, you also need to understand what your police departments are doing in your name. Like, you know, the city council. So Shankar Narayan, our technology, liberty, and privacy director, does a lot of this work where so much of what he does is, like, he educates people using plain, understandable, like, small words. And sometimes even then I'll be like, smaller words, Shankar, I didn't follow. But he talks to government officials and says, hey, there's this stuff out here. Do you understand what it's doing? And you need to put some basic controls in place, like transparency measures or data accountability measures. And that's really the first step.
So that's all the questions that we gathered. And we probably could take one more if there's another burning question, but if not, we can just do the raffle. How's our funding? So thanks for asking that. So, you know, we had, people really came through, right? Like, after the election happened, there was a boost. People decided to join the ACLU, right? And then also right after that first Muslim ban happened, more people joined, and we're really grateful for that, because I'll tell you, what that has meant for us locally, we were able to, for the first time, hire an immigration specialist, because there's so many, right? And you heard from her, we were here last month, and she's not super fantastic, right? And we didn't have anybody who was bringing that policy experience and expertise into our office, and that has made a huge difference in a lot of our advocacy around the state. It has enabled us to bring in a couple of short-term attorneys to help with this, like, the huge volume, like intake up by more than 50% in any given moment this year than it was last year. So that has been super great. So now here's the thing. Are people going to continue to be invested in this? Or was it like, okay, we got kind of upset and excited, and so we gave some money? So I want to tell you that, like, we're still in this. We're not even a full year into this administration, okay? And you have seen so many things that have happened already just so rapidly. And I have to expect that there's more to come. So the fundraising actually really does need to continue. We're not in, like, some complacent space. And as I said before, with nationwide 350 attorneys to Mr. Sessions' 11,000 attorneys, and all these battles coming, they have the machinery of that government office and all those people. Yeah, we still need that fundraising to stay strong. So our development team is working super hard. We're really grateful to you guys for showing up here and for whatever you do and bring in whatever way you do it. Yeah, just keep it coming. Okay. And the other thing I just thought I'd mention, I often mention this in the beginning, but I didn't today, but you know, if you are signed up as a member or if you've signed up for our action alerts, those are things that really are meaningful for us, because when we send out those action alerts to tell you, hey, the Seattle City Council is looking at a surveillance ordinance to actually put some checks and balances on these new technologies that the city and mostly the police departments are using. And then when you guys send the letters to your council members and show up at the council meetings, which so many of you did, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I sat through those meetings. You guys were coming. You brought your little printout signs. And thank you for that. Like, that actually matters because they do know that you vote and that you're showing up. And when you fill up that room or when you fill their email inboxes, I know our legislative director was sharing about how one of the legislators said, I can't remember what the issue was, but he'd gotten like 500 emails like in a day, and he says, wow, you guys are really speaking up about this, and I guess I better do something differently. So, like, really please, not only sign up for the action alerts, but actually follow through on them. Many of you are doing that, and it makes a huge difference. Again, this battle that we're in takes all of us together. We're really glad you're in it with us. It gives us a lot of inspiration because it can get a little rough on us and on our spirits, right? In this work that we're doing, when every day it feels like there's this onslaught and we're trying to fight against it. So thank you for being in that with us. So with that being said, should we see who's going to win the raffle tonight? Yeah. She works in our Okay, our first raffle winner is Roy Lynn. Are you still here? Roy Lynn? Lynn Roy? Okay. Sorry, Roy Lynn or Lynn Roy. Okay, I just picked another one because you weren't here. Okay, Lori Farmer? Laney Farmer. Oh, your name looks like an R. Sorry. Okay, Laney Farmer.
You know, my ACLU card actually says Larry Farmer when my name is Laney Farmer.
So you let us.
That's
right to us.
Larry? No, that's me.
No. We want to give you a better card. So would you talk to one of the people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have one more gift to give. Ooh. Okay. Sariti Chandrasekhar? Sariti? Right here? Oh, did I mangle your name correctly? All right. You guys, thanks. Let's keep, next Flights and Rights, November 28th. Sign up, join us. Thank you. Have a good night.